Let's talk about the Oscar-nominated, pretty scandalous drama set in Mexico. Not that one, no, the good one, the one that actually deserved to win awards. Tu Mamá También was written by brothers Carlos and Alfonso Cuarón, directed by Alfonso Cuarón, who brought us Roma and Children of Men and the darkest of the Harry Potter films. This indie movie was their passion project. It was both a love letter to and a confrontation of their home country, Mexico. And the main characters are not monogamous. So let's look at it. But first, hey, I'm Genevieve. I'm polyamorous and non-monogamous for 13 years. I do long-form videos and resources here, short-form videos and resources here. This channel is also funded by my Patreon, which has 6 years of polyamory advice and support. But on this channel, we have fun. I take a look at non-monogamy in film and TV. What do they do well? What's messy and they get wrong? In my opinion, let's get into it. At the risk of oversimplifying, good non-monogamy won't make for a good drama. Because think about it, if a character were to say, I really want to kiss you, and the other person is like, okay, great, me too, and then they kiss, it's not gonna be dramatic. Contrast that with if you had 2 characters who hate each other, but the vibe is that they want to kiss each other. Like, dramas need tension and conflict and betrayal, you know? Dramas need subtext. There needs to be things that are unclear or unsaid that gets the audience invested on the emotional roller coaster, right? It's thrilling to watch on screen, not fun to live in real life. So paradoxically, a movie can be a beautiful drama and like a perfect work of art and have trash non-monogamy. And this is where we find Tu Mamá También. It's a 2001 coming-of-age road trip film with 2 best friends from Mexico City, Tenoch and Julio, played by very young Diego Luna and Gael Garcia Bernal. After their girlfriends leave for the summer, they both meet Luisa, a hot older woman. They hit on her together, tell her all about this beautiful beach they'll take her to. But she's married and a bit reserved and says no thanks. But then she gets a call from her husband saying he cheated on her. So she calls up Tenoch and is like, so tell me about this beach again? And all 3 set off on an adventure.
Julio y Tenoch contaron a Luisa muchas anécdotas más. Cada historia confirmaba el fuerte lazo que los unía, el vínculo que los volvía un núcleo sólido e inseparable.
There's this omniscient voiceover throughout the whole film who's not really like narrating the film so much as stepping in to offer context or things that even the main characters themselves don't know. Because in the background are scenes of social unrest and poverty just all around them. The 3 are oblivious, but the narrator describes it for us. The camera will pan and look at it for us. You know, it gives contrast between their carefree vibe and the class struggle all around them. On the trip, Luisa sleeps with Tenoch, and Julio gets upset. But he also kind of wants to watch. Then she sleeps with Julio, and Tenoch gets upset. But then he kind of wants to watch. And the whole time, erotic tension builds between these 2 men. We keep kind of wondering, are they ever going to act on it? But you get the sense that they're also scared of ruining their friendship. Their friendship is so strong that they have a label for it and a manifesto. They call themselves the Astral Cowboys, the Charolastras, and they have like rules for their friendship. Like they've really thought about this to the point of like legislation. However, one of the main rules is that they don't hook up with each other's girlfriends, a rule that both of them broke. After they each also sleep with Luisa, that's when the truth comes out. The betrayal almost tears them apart. But Luisa actually keeps them together and helps them reunite. And before long, they're even celebrating the fact that they're not monogamous.
Perdonado.
Oye, Luisa.
¿Qué?
Luisa. Net.
Ay,
¿Quién coge más chingón de nosotros dos?
And part of what makes the movie so intense and visceral is the chemistry between, the very real chemistry between them. And it turns out Diego Luna and Gael Garcia Bernal have been friends since childhood. The film has a lot of examples of non-monogamy, so I'm going to give you the highlight reel, and then we'll go a little deeper. I might also use some creative language to avoid censorship on this platform, so bear with me. I might be saying romantic or sensual when I really mean something dirtier, but we're going to roll with it. When Tenoch and Julio's girlfriends leave for the summer, the guys are begging them, please don't cheat, even though they've been cheating on them this whole time, So it kind of seems like there is this open secret that none of them really think they're in monogamous relationships. It kind of sets the tone. It's the first scene. It sets the tone for the whole film of this tension between monogamy or not. So our first exposure to actually not being monogamous is a side character, their friend Saba.
Esa misma noche, Saba participó en su primera experiencia de sexo colectivo.
Their friend Saba had his first multiple partner sensual experience. And what's kind of a cute and subtle moment is that when the boys go visit Saba later, Saba's two partners are there in the background braiding each other's hair. It sort of shows that it wasn't all for Saba's pleasure, if that makes sense. That this wasn't just him getting two women, it was three people choosing to do something that felt nice. So we as an audience dip our toes into non-normative relating. Told you I'm gonna get creative here, okay? The next time we see someone step outside of monogamy, it is through cheating. Cheating is, unfortunately, technically not monogamy. It's the worst version of it. Don't lie and hide and betray people. There's so many other options out there. It is with Luisa's husband, Hano. Hano is on a trip and he calls Luisa crying.
Jano, tranquilo. Jano, ¿qué te pasa?
Me acosté con otra. ¿Qué digo? Que soy una mierda. Luisa.
He's like, oh, I'm such a bad person. This moment's about me. You can't really get mad at me if I already hate myself. I hate when people do this. It unfortunately happens too much in the real world and it sucks. And we do find out later that she knows it's not the first time. After that, she's done. She calls up the guys and runs away with them. She needs a distraction, and she needs it now.
¿Qué?
Me quité la toalla.
¿La toalla?
Sí, la toalla.
Julio, when he stumbles upon Tenoch and Luisa together, he feels very withdrawn and depressed, and he's reminded of a betrayal from his childhood. But then in the car, when Luisa climbs on top of Julio, Tenoch doesn't want to see that, he says, and runs away, but then tries to get a good look and be a voyeur from afar. There's this distress at it happening, but also the desire for it to happen. I also was wondering, why do they care that the other one slept with her, right? Both of them met Luisa at the same time. They both also set out to try to hook up with her, right? They were we should hook up with her. Whether they meant that as a trio or not, that seemed like it was always the plan. So Tenoch slept with Luisa and Julio feels betrayed. So he picks that moment to finally tell Tenoch that he slept with his girlfriend.
Yo me cogí a Ana.
¿Qué?
Tenoch is just stunned. He doesn't know what to say. But later that night is when his anger comes out. He starts grilling Julio about what exactly happened.
¿Qué calzones traía puestos?
¿Qué?
¿Qué calzones traía puestos? ¿Sí me oíste, pendejo?
Blancos, creo, güey. Blancos.
¿Y que te la mamó, puerco?
No, ¿cómo crees,
A
cabrón?
ver, veme a los ojos, pendejo. ¿Te la mamó?
No.
Tenoch wants just extensive, excruciating detail, which, if it's consensual non-monogamy, some people find really hot. That's part of what the thrill is being able to imagine it or even being there when it happens. But when it's cheating, when it's betrayal, then I feel like you're just twisting the knife on yourself when you want to know more details or paint a picture. I don't know what purpose that serves other than just to make it hurt more. And that's what happens. Tenoch just keeps getting angrier and angrier and angrier and angrier. This is not helping.
Tenoch se detuvo en una búsqueda interminable de detalles, con los que trataba de reconstruir un rompecabezas de piezas que no siempre embonaban.
And remember, Tenoch slept with Julio's girlfriend too. He just hasn't admitted that part yet. And he could have said it that night to hurt him back, but it's not until Luisa sleeps with Julio. Then Tenoch decides to finally drop that bomb, and it does not go well.
¡Bájate, cabrón! ¡Bájate, cabrón! ¡Que nos vamos a partir la madre, güey!
He gets very angry and wants to fight and wants Tenoch to get on his knees and beg for forgiveness.
Ya, perdón, cabrón.
Con las dos rodillas, güey.
Ahí
Bien.
está, güey, perdón.
¿Perdón qué?
Perdón, Julio, por haberme cogido a tu vieja la Ceci. Ya, güey.
Now, what's interesting is both boys were at each other's throats, but they didn't have that same amount of smoke for their own girlfriends who betrayed them. They were way more concerned with their best friend's betrayal. And the movie does this dance where there's like tension and fighting with homoerotic overtones, you know? And when the three do come back together and they're all drinking together, now suddenly the fact that they've slept with each other's girlfriends is like a bonding experience.
Ya que estamos tirando netas, güey, neto. La neta es que sí me cogí a la Ceci varias veces, güey. Ay, pues no hay pedo, güey. Yo también le he estado poniendo con Lana un chingo.
They start to admit, hey, it wasn't just a one-off. We've both been sleeping with each other's partners, like a lot, you know? And they're like celebrating that. They're like moving past the sort of territorialism or the like machismo and being like, hey, we're brothers, you know?
O sea que me le he pasado removiendo a Tole, güey. ¡Ay, yo también! Pendejo, ¿te das cuenta, güey? Somos hermanitos de leche.
For some reason, this translation calls it foster brothers. Another translation more accurately calls it milk brothers. But they're not talking about milk. And it apparently is a thing that some men will say of like, hey, we both slept with the same person. We're milk brothers. And it's in that moment that Luisa declares they are friends again. And so what is the film saying about this friendship? Like, what are they defining friendship as, you know? Is it the jovialness? Is it the acceptance of each other and all of your faults? Is it the actually being honest, like honest with each other? Or is it the acceptance of fluidity in ways that you express affection, right? Like they're celebrating it. And this coming back together culminates in the trio sleeping together. So it was really cool to see how the film handled this scene as opposed to all the other scenes in bed, which had full frontal and back nudity, you know? It was like start to finish, the act, we see it in full, you know what I mean? Like they did not shy away from graphic depictions, realistic depictions of sleeping with people. But in this scene, by not showing bodies and not focusing on any sort of lewdness, it forces the audience to pay attention to that emotional exchange. Even when Luisa goes downtown, you know, we don't see her doing any of that. We stay with the boys who finally share this moment together, who finally is this culmination of tension finally breaking through, and now they're in this new stage of their care for each other. It is momentous. And the whole time I was watching this, I was literally chanting like kiss, 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 yeah! I was like, let's go. I started cheering, you know, because it was a release. It was a catharsis. It was freeing to see them be freer in that moment. Finally. And then the film kind of cuts away. It almost like gives them their privacy. Like maybe we shouldn't be in the sheets with them for this. Maybe that's all that we get to see, and that's enough. It is truly the high watermark of this movie, right? This is the image that to this day, people will write about non-monogamy and use this image in the thumbnail. So those are the main times that the film tackles non-monogamy on screen. For the most part, none of it was like talked about outright. Again, drama. And each time it's using non-monogamy in a sense to tackle a different, bigger topic about queerness or class or politics. So let's dig a bit deeper, starting with the love story between these two boys. Long before the kiss, the film is playing with where is this line between friend and lover, if there even is one between these two, right? Because yeah, they kiss, that's the most undeniable cross of the line. But before that, early in the film, we see the two boys pleasure themselves together. They're both thinking about the same woman. Is that where the line is? Or like in the shower when, as a joke, Tenoch's eye drifts downward and he comments on Julio's body, leaning in for a closer look. And then as a joke, Julio chases him around naked, telling him to get on his knees. As a joke. And they're doing all this while calling each other anti-gay slurs to sort of get close and then push away, you know? Are they crossing it, or do they have plausible deniability? It is obvious that there is homoerotic tension between them, like Luisa even gets frustrated and says as much.
Marcando territorio y dándonos de hostias cuando lo único que os gustaría sería follar el uno con el otro. Eso es lo que os gustaría.
She's like, why don't you both go screw each other? That's obvious what you want to do. And that's the tricky part of them finally kissing. It makes it undeniable. You can't say that was just a joke. Even if they blamed it on the alcohol, it revealed that somewhere deep down in there, their uninhibited selves wanted to do that. Both of them did. And we see them sort of react to it with discomfort and sort of like, I don't have a social script for what to do next, you know? They're both hungover. Tenoch goes and throws up, you know? It's like not unrealistic of finally, like you're living the way you want to live. You were finally uninhibited enough to do it. But then when you kind of get back to your norm or your baseline, you're like, wait, what now? But since this is a story about queerness among Mexican men specifically, I also reached out to Jaime Gama. He is a gay Mexican non-monogamous man. He also formally studied, his master's thesis was on masculinity in gay Mexican men's spaces. Gotitas de Polyamor, if you want to follow him there, it's all content in Spanish.
So as men, at least in my country, in my culture, there's this heaviness in the prototype of what a masculine man is, where the only way we can touch each other is through violence. You know, like if you're playing with your cousin or with your brother or something, and you're fighting each other, they like, yes, do it. But if you get too close, they separate you. And the message is, if you're too close, I will separate you, society will separate you, and you will be judged, you will be attacked, you will hurt. We are not taught there's more than that binary. Even though these two, they're boys, they're very young and they're very silly, but I think that's what makes them the most afraid of connection, the most afraid of vulnerability. I want to be close, I want to touch you, but where's the line? And if you cross that line and I reject you, will you leave me forever? Will you hate me? When they actually sleep with each other and they wake up with each other, it's like they're naked, they're vulnerable, they're intimate, and they run away. And they're like, this didn't happen. There's this closeness that is lost the moment they acknowledge that they can have more intimacy. That's very Mexican traditional society.
And that's a really tough thing for them to reckon with, because like if it is this binary of either I take all of this or I take none of this, then they are at a turning point where they have to choose. So we see how the film uses these characters and non-monogamy specifically as a way to like then explore queerness and then talk about masculinity and like where the lines are there. The film also has quite a lot to say about women. We don't spend a lot of time with literal mothers, but it feels like motherhood and matriarchy, the power of the mother is like present. We see reference to Our Lady of Guadalupe, which is a Catholic name for the Virgin Mary, the Virgin Mother, you know. They pass a van on the highway covered in imagery dedicated to her. Also on the highway, they pass by Tenoch's nanny's hometown.
Leo encontró trabajo en casa de los Iturbide y estuvo al cuidado de Tenoch desde recién nacido. Hasta los 4 años le decía mamá.
They make a point to say that Tenoch, until the age of 4, called his nanny Mama. This is a service worker, a hired employee, who bringing a sandwich all the way up from the kitchen to Tenoch to serve it to him without him lifting a finger. The phone is ringing next to him, and instead of picking it up, he waits for her to go pick it up. It's for him, and then she wipes off the receiver. And it's this complicated question the film is asking us of like, is the mother figure always revered? And in fact, the woman who plays this role was Alfonso Cuarón's real nanny growing up. She is who the movie Roma is dedicated to. So the role of a mother comes up kind of a lot for a film about young men's sensual awakening. I mean, it's in the title, Tu Mamá También, and Your Mother Too, which colloquially, as far as I understand it, is sort of like a yo mama joke, you know what I mean? Of like, it's said like as a playful insult. Correct me if I'm wrong, you know? But it's also a play on words because Julio says this to Tenoch when he's confessing that he slept with his girlfriend, and he's like, and your mother too. And it's like, are you joking? Or did you actually sleep with my mother? You know what I mean?
Oye, Tenoch. Dime. Y a tu mamá también. No mames.
¿Qué?
Me cae, güey, el día que me hizo la limpia.
¿Lo dices en serio? ¿Sí?
In Mexico, we have a very matriarchal, not tradition, but structure. So mothers are like adored, venerated, worshipped. But we still have a patriarchal society. So even though at home, it's your mother, outside of that, it's a woman. And they're so like disconnected that some people don't even realize it's the same thing. When the boy says, I had sex with your mother, it's like, oh, but mothers are sacred, right? My mother is not a woman. which is very much Madonna core complex.
So this age-old idea of a woman being either a mother or the object of desire, they sort of play with that, you know? Luisa is very much the boy's object of desire, right? She's more experienced, she's confident, she's hot. They have been lusting after her, right? Remember earlier when I said that the boys pleasured themselves together? They were thinking about the same woman. That woman was Luisa. They have been hungry for her leading up to this moment. We get to see her have freedom and agency, that she's the one choosing to pursue both boys at the same time in front of each other, right? Like, she's really leading the charge on the kind of experience she wants to have. And when they are fumbling, when they are very much awkward little boys about it, you know, she's kind of mothering them. Holding them close and cradling them. She's wiser, she's more experienced. Also offering this like support and maternal role to both of them, you know? And so it's really through these multiple different relationships happening concurrently that we like kind of see a lot of sides of Luisa. And she's not just maternal in the context of hooking up with the guys. Like, we see her teaching a little girl how to swim in a very loving way. She's rocking a child as if it's her own. She gets humanized. You know, the narrator tells us a lot about her backstory. She's been through a lot of loss and tragedy, had to grow up quick and take care of her sick family members. She got married young and now her husband cheated on her. Like, we get to see the complexity of her as a human being, you know? She's crying at night and then she's hypersensual during the day, wants distractions, wants novelty, you know? We can empathize with the escapism that she's kind of getting from this, or the fact that she's searching for something, she needs a change, and we understand why. And I think the reason they're able to show all of these sides of her is because even though the boys objectify her, the camera does not. It's not scanning her body from toe up to neck, you know? It's not focusing on body parts. It is kind of a wide shot, fly on the wall documentary style angle. Alfonso Cuarón literally said, "We didn't want to make American Pie." I mean, where's the lie though, you know? So the audience stays in this sort of voyeuristic role until at the very end, right before the trio goes to bed together, Luisa turns around at the jukebox and she breaks the fourth wall, dancing with the camera itself. She is seducing you now. She is now welcoming you into this moment, and the camera changes to a lot more close-ups, a lot more in the middle of the action kind of vibe. You know, and even just showing her leading the charge and wanting non-monogamy, that also shakes up the idea of like a woman's role in this, because so often women, or just like femmes of any gender, get like infantilized, like, oh, who's making you do this? Literally no one. Like, I decided to be non-monogamous when I was single, you know? It's like, basically like, don't assume someone's a victim, you know, in this. Like, we very much can be having a great time. This very much could have been our idea. Though not for nothing, the film did have me wondering, like, is Luisa just a tool for these boys to like have their own realization? And I think the answer is no, but like no asterisk. Because she has an arc. It's mostly off screen. We get told about her life all up until now, and then we meet her right here, you know? She's like at the tail end of her arc, and within the movie, she's like she's kind of the same throughout, but she changes their lives. She plays a major role in each guy's awakening, helps them realize who they are and what they really want. I did find myself wondering, like, is she some shade of a manic pixie dream girl? And if you're not familiar with the manic pixie dream girl trope, it's this character, usually a woman, who comes onto the scene and brings out of the shell, usually a man, gets him to embrace life and go on adventures, and then leaves. You know, it's like her whole purpose was to help this other character, you know, come alive. And early on in the film, we see a poster of Harold and Maude, a film that actually inspired a lot of present-day manic pixie dream girl types. You know, I don't think that's an accident. Because think about it, Luisa's the catalyst for their non-monogamy, for the reunion of their friendship, for their queer self-discovery. She's not a flat character by any means. She's just a bit more of a supportive role to them than I expected. So it's not perfectly fitting the stereotype, but it's not really escaping it either. This film is about a duo plus one at the end of the day. Diego Luna himself said we were making a love story between the two men. This was very much Tenoch and Julio's love story. It's not bad, but it's just something that feels like it's still a monogamous person telling our story because it's still about a couple, if that makes sense. And I would just love to see more trios on screen that aren't like a version of monogamy plus one, you know? And so I mentioned this as layers, right? So while exploring non-monogamy and in that doing like gender roles and queerness, there's also a deeper level of where they talk about how all that intersects with class and politics. During the road trip, the three of them are pretty carefree and they're just focused on their own adventure, their own liberation, right? But all in the background, we see military checkpoints. We see poor people and farmers being heckled by people with guns. Around the turn of the millennium, when this film came out, in Mexico, there was a big upheaval change in the political parties, and a sort of like this identity crisis gets described. And there's also class division in a very big, real way.
There's a neighborhood here in Mexico City called Santa Fe, which is like where people with a lot of money, a lot of businesses, a lot of offices like live there. When I was in university doing my university studies, I was surrounded by rich people, rich kids. The teacher was showing us some areas of poverty or things that were happening in the city. And one of them said, "Oh my God, where is this happening? Like that just feels like someone should do something about that." And I said, "Well, it's like 10 minutes that way. What you're seeing is next to you. You drive by it on your way to school." And she was like, "Oh my God, it's horrible that Mexicans are going through that." And I said, "You're Mexican." She said, no, like real Mexicans, you know? And it feels like there's been this disconnect of real Mexicans are the ones who are poor or who are the ones who live in like little towns outside the city or in the countryside. Whereas the other Mexicans are in the city, they have money, they're whiter. So throughout the movie, like there's a lot of moments that are representative of injustice or oppression or poverty or inequality. And it's all ignored.
We're seeing the suffering and the conflict all around them, right? It kind of points out like, hey, are you looking? Are you listening? Are you paying attention? You know, because these three aren't, and look at everything that they're missing. But it's not just outside the car that we see major inequality. Tenoch is very rich. His father's a powerful politician in the current government. Meanwhile, Julio's family is very working class, whose sister literally is protesting that very same government. The boys actually have this tension, this kind of like unspoken class conflict between each other, you know, of like, yeah, we're friends, we're equals, but are we kind of vibe? Like they won't tell each other these truths, but the narrator reveals that every time Tenoch goes to Julio's home, he lifts the bathroom toilet seat up with his foot because he doesn't want to touch it because he thinks the place is dirty. And every time Julio goes to Tenoch's home, he lights a match in the bathroom because he doesn't want to leave a smell behind. And they're both trying to like paper over it and be like, nah, we're brothers, right? We're equals. Yes and no. And a lot of times people will try to flatten that, either out of just ignorance and not paying attention, usually the richer person, or out of like discomfort with the contradictions there. It'll try to be like, no, we're the same, but you have very different lived experiences. Like you can't ignore that, you know? It always comes to an eruption at some point, which is exactly what happens. As soon as the guys start fighting, some of their very first insults are about class.
Chicos, ya.
¡Vete a la... ¡Clásico! ¡A huevo te tenía que salir lo pinche nacote, güey!
Pues este pinche naco te va a partir toda tu madre, cabrón.
¡Me la pelas, naco! ¡Me la pelas!
¡Bájate, cabrón!
¡Chinga tu madre, güey!
¡Julio de mierda!
Where Tenoch calls Julio a boorish social climber, and Julio calls Tenoch a petty bourgeois prick. In his essay, Sex, Class, and Mexico, in Alfonso Cuarón's Y Tu Mamá También, Ernesto Acevedo Muñoz points out that the violent argument's not only framed and divided by the car window, there's also a small sticker on the window with Mexico's tricolor flag. From outside the car, Julio spits on the glass and the symbol of Mexico. And even though the boys agree to end the fight, they also agree that their differences are now irreconcilable, and the glass separating the characters underscore these problems. And so the film kind of like naming that and side-eyeing that without being too heavy-handed, like that was really refreshing. That's something that is so nuanced that I don't often see. Another topic the film doesn't shy away from is grief, mourning, what happens when we reflect on our own mortality. On the road, they pass by a memorial. Again, they're not paying attention at all, but the narrator shares how 10 years prior, there was a car crash at that spot. Like, at first we only see a glimpse of it as the car whizzes past it without thinking twice, but the narrator really focuses on it and gives it the reverence it deserves.
Si hubieran pasado por este mismo lugar 10 años antes, se habrían topado con un par de jaulas tiradas sobre el pavimento. Y más adelante, un camión volteado, echando humo. Al rebasarlo, habrían visto 2 cuerpos tirados, inertes. Uno más pequeño, mal cubiertos por una chamarra. Y una mujer desconsolada llorando a su lado.
Behind every one of those is a heartbreaking story with heartbroken people. And the film's basically asking us, are you willing to pause and slow down and contemplate memorials all around you to reflect on what happened there and who was affected by it? And we see this right after Luisa tells the boys that, you know, before she met Hano, she had the love of her life who died in a motorcycle accident.
Estaba tan enamorada de mi futuro. Muy enamorada. Y llegó Hano a dar baches, seguro. No, güey. Entonces, se mató en la moto.
She remembers the heartwarming things about her boyfriend, and in the same breath mentions the way he passed. She seems pretty familiar with loss, and the boys clearly aren't. And she also quietly reflects, pretty often, on her own death. Luisa contemplates like how long she might be remembered after she's gone. And soon after, she's gifted a stuffed mouse from a woman whose granddaughter, also named Luisa, had died. And so now this mouse carries on with another Luisa. And the mouse is this kind of memory, you know, even after I'm gone, parts of me will still be here. But just because she's familiar with loss does not mean she's zen and unbothered. She's mourning every night privately, you know, and sort of after a moment of thinking about death or talking about death, Luisa like pauses and then immediately goes to the back seat to climb on top of Julio. And I was like, that's so real. Like, oh, I want to escape. I want to feel better, you know, and sometimes that feels like the arms of another person, you know. My heart went out to her, just like, I get it. It's a picture of grief we don't always see on screen, which is the thrill seeking or the escapism, the camaraderie, the intimacy that we pursue while we're also in these lows. We'll get some highs again too, you know, and like sometimes films will just show the sadness of grief and not the more well-rounded picture of it.
A la 1 de la tarde de ese mismo día, Julio y Tenoch emprendieron el regreso. Fue un viaje sin eventualidades y muy silencioso.
After Julio and Tenoch sleep together, they are silent in the car ride all the way home, and then they stop seeing each other entirely. These men who loved each other so much that they had a manifesto about their friendship. Just like that, it was over.
Tenoch se disculpó. Su novia lo esperaba para ir al cine. Julio insistió en pagar la cuenta. Nunca volverán a verse.
Pues hablamos, ¿no? Sí.
It is the death of a friendship. And like Jaime was talking about earlier, this all or nothing, you know, you're either doing all of it or doing none of it. And crossing that line risks that. It's real, and it leaves us to grieve their friendship, us to grieve what might have been. At that same time is when the narrator reveals that Luisa was actually keeping a secret from the start. That just before she learned she was cheated on, just before her husband called her, she learned that she has cancer throughout her entire body. She learned that she only has a few months to live. And so hence if this is all that I've got left, I'm gonna live the hell out of it, right? I'm gonna go where I wanna go, beautiful beaches, sleep with young hot guys, like go and experience life if it's about to end. And even though it hits you hard, you know, it also like kind of motivates you. It's like, okay, well, what if you only had a few months to live? How would you live? What would you do? And what if you lived that way now? You know, what if you could do it for a whole lot more than a few months, you know? And that kind of motivates to say like, come on, you know, mortality is hitting all of us, you know, this is going to end at some point. How do you want to live? Are you living the way you want? it's really the kind of movie that after you're done, you want to start making plans, you know? You want to start exploring, you want to tell somebody what you need to tell them, you know? Not wait till it's too late. It really kind of kicks you in the ass. I did not think that an ending like that could make me feel optimistic, could make me feel like passionate about life, but here we are, you know?
Al despedirse de Tenoch y Julio, Luisa les dijo: la vida es como la espuma, por eso hay que darse como el mar.
Luisa's parting words for both Tenoch and Julio, but also for us: life is like the foam of the sea. You must dive into it. Hands down, this is the best movie that I've covered for this channel. You know, it's in a tight race with like Past Lives and Challengers. I'd say those are the top three. Like the pacing and the chemistry of the characters and the thoughtful writing and the contrast of experiences and all of the layers of everything they covered, you know, it's kind of a perfect work of art. And the non-monogamy is trash. Both things can be true. But that is my take. I would love to know what yours is. Have you seen the movie? Have you seen it recently? Do you want to see it again now? I highly recommend. Thank you so much for supporting a small channel trying to grow, especially to my patrons without whom this wouldn't be possible. So if you want more from me, patreon.com/chillpolyamory. Until I see you again, I hope you're taking care of yourself and being good to the people around you.